If you'd like to try what we make at Superstition, it's as easy as going to our website, superstitionmeadery.com, clicking on Web Store, and you're shopping. Make sure you follow us on social media because we release new products almost every week, and you might just find your next favorite craft beverage. Cheers. All right, we're going to see how Super Bee, which is a sweet traditional mead that we make at Superstition, is doing as it's aging in barrels. So for the most part, Super Bee is made with one honey. When we first made it, we were able to source ironwood honey. So the ironwood is a desert tree, and it made a very unique honey. And we entered the first Super Bee into the Mazer Cup, which is the world's largest mead competition, and it won a gold medal so it was the best sweet traditional mead in the world that year, and we kept making it. It turns out that certain types of honeys aren't going to be available every year, and we decided that we found some wildflower honey we felt really resembled the ironwood honey we used to use, and so we made a giant batch. We liked it so much, it was 1,000 gallons of a traditional sweet mead with Arizona wildflower honey, and that is what has become the most recently released batch of Super Bee. So we had a lot, and we wanted to do something new. And so we selected some really cool barrels. Some we're repurposing, we'll talk about that in a minute, in order to create something that's never been done before. A sweet traditional mead aged in some really unique barrels. So what I just did was sanitize a stainless steel nail into the head of these barrels where we place this 4D stainless nail. I also sanitized the bungs because sometimes negative pressure builds up. We might see that while we're taking a sample, and you have to vent the bung, put it back down. But in general, what we want to do is have a minimal impact into this liquid. We don't want to have wild yeast bacteria. I don't even see a fruit fly, but fruit flies love to come and try and dine on this sweet barrel candy that seeps out of here, and that can introduce acetobacter, which could turn your product into vinegar. So we've taken our precautions, and at this point, the alcohol that we sprayed is drying up, and so I'm going to pull this nail out and catch a sample into the ambassador. And if I happen to drop a nail, I have the same size nail and one size up in case we need to replace this guy without worrying about it falling on the ground, and we'll clean and sanitize that again later. So my favorite tool is a nice old-fashioned carpenter's hammer here, and that nail is just loose enough so it's ready to pull. We have a nice healthy stream coming out, no need to ventilate the bung. And so this Super Bee, that's plenty for me to get a sense of what's going on, is in a barrel that started its life out, at least before we obtained it, as a vermouth barrel. Because I was spraying alcohol and whatnot in the air, I'm just kind of transferring this and just gonna stand right here, give this a swirl, let it open up. But we did a really cool mead. It was a mead for our guild last year that we call Arabesque. And Arabesque was a vermouth barrel-aged mead, but we crushed and then fermented whole plums on the skins with bergamot orange zest, jasmine pearls, which is a kind of like a very light tea, and saffron. And it created something that had never been done before. There's so much honey in the nose coming out of this. I know what Super Bee is, so in my head, I can sort of slice this in half in my head as I'm thinking about it, and I can be like, all right, there's the Super Bee part, but then there's all of this arabesque character that's happening just in the aroma. There's definitely some alcohol in there. I can smell the vermouth. Vermouth is a barrel. It's the only barrel we've ever used where, and this sounds ridiculous to anyone that knows about barrel aging, but you can pull a nail the next day and actually taste vermouth. I mean, and I'm not even talking about a barrel full. I mean, like just from the staves, it's amazing. It's so potent. The different herbs and botanicals that can go into vermouth are really, really unique and powerful. And I don't know why scientifically, but they're so expressive in a barrel. Because this had a mead in it for a while, it's not as punchy like the vermouth used to be, which means it's actually more balanced. All right, I mean orange, light tea, a little saffron if I use my imagination, but definitely honey, alcohol, orange, tea, I don't really smell plum, but plums, it's kind of weird. I mean, what's a plum smell like? Wow, that is delicious. It tastes, in some ways, how you'd expect it to from the aroma, but it has almost a vanilla quality that's going on that I really didn't expect. So that could be coming from the wood. If you've followed this YouTube channel, you know that we talk a lot about how when you cook wood, the fiber C lignin that makes wood, you're gonna change that chemically into different things. One of those is vanillin. So we could be getting vanilla from the wood, but I don't think, so I'm looking at my liquid chronicle here. So I know that we've got Super B in here. I know it went in October of last year. I know that we filled 4 of these barrels. We've got 2 of them right here to try. We've got, it was vermouth, that was the type of barrel, but it was previously filled with arabesque. We filled this thing twice. This is the second time that we've had a liquid in it that we've put in. We didn't do any rinsing, and we ran it through a pretty fine filter before it went into this barrel. So sometimes we will filter before barrel, and the great thing about it is when you're gonna pull it out of a barrel, it's ready to package. I mean, it's brilliant, it's beautiful, it's rich and golden, which is also in part from the saffron that was in there. Saffron will not give you a huge flavor component, because you honestly could never afford to do that. I think it's like $4,500 a pound. But when you put saffron in, one thing that will happen is you'll get a nice rich golden color, depending on how much you use. And so I think that we're seeing some of the residual effects of the saffron that was in the staves we're absorbing, because that looks richer to me than the Super B before it went in. But I've got to think that and I'm remembering what that ironwood honey tasted like in my head. And I know what the wildflower honey tastes like, fermented. And I think the way that it's interacting with the wood and the mead that was in there before, it's somehow creating this vanilla flavor. There's so many different aspects that make honey honey. And to think, how can those combine with this unprecedented list of ingredients that went into this barrel, and just this certain amount is left in there, and it's working together to create that flavor. It's kind of a beautiful concept. Super B in a vermouth barrel, formerly arabesque, our guild mead. Same deal on, we didn't rinse these barrels out. We didn't have to do anything special to it. We wanted to retain the character of what was in here before. All right, we're gonna get a good stream? Nice. That is always an option. You can clean your barrels just with hot water. Some people will use some sulfite citric acid solution, especially if they were gonna store that for any amount of time. You should never store a barrel dry once it's actually been filled, because it will shrink up like this old guy. And you can see this actually kind of wiggles around. But if this was brand new, like a freshly made American oak barrel, it would look similar to this, but there'd be absolutely no gaps here, and it'd be ready to be filled. And then that wood swells, but if you let it dry out, it's gonna shrink and it'll never fit together just right. And that's when we have to get into our barrel tools, if you're lucky. But I always say 6 weeks max on a barrel. 4 is ideal. And of course there's stories depending on what was in there and how you treat it and the temperature and humidity, where you could get lucky if you got greedy on leaving something empty for too long. But for the most part, 4 weeks you're golden. 6 weeks is probably a good policy to have if you're doing barrels. Similar aroma. Actually, I get a little less ethanol and a little more vermouth in this barrel. And I can kind of smell, and it could just be because the sensors in my nose and on my palate and my tongue are now tuned into that vanilla thing, but I'm smelling vanilla where I didn't smell it before. Very similar taste, but even more balanced. This one is a little bit spicier, a little bit more piquant, but I think, like, if you actually bottled these separately one at a time, you'd need a real discerning palate to be able to say to yourself, okay, this one's a little different. But I think that they are so close that it makes sense we're gonna blend these, and then we'll have a really nice run of a very special traditional mead. Wow, delicious. I'm pretty proud of that. So let's move on and try the same product, the same mead that started off as Super Bee with wildflower honey, but it went into a different barrel. So again, we've already done our sanitation. We're gonna make sure we have our nails handy. This guy is Super Bee, and it also went in on the same day in October last year. It started off as a new American oak barrel from Missouri with medium plus stave. That's how they toast it, the staves and the heads of the barrel. So the TH means toasted heads. The leaders, this is a style of barrel it's always going to be in the same size, same dimensions, most importantly, because the way we stack our barrels, you always want to have like barrels set as pairs in these barrel racks, or they could start to become uneven, which could create a problem. So we're always doing the same style, same dimensions of barrels together on the same rack. And so this is the 4th time this barrel's been filled. And if I look under here, it's actually, it's on the other side. But we put 2019 Blackberry White in here at one point in time. So this barrel was probably made 3 years ago. And then we did a Merlot Piment, which I believe was not an Aphrodisia variant, but one of our contingency series. We did something special because we had never used that grape before. And then Harris Orchard. So that's a beautiful stone fruit mead. So now I have no idea what this is gonna taste like. But there's quite a pedigree in this barrel. And as the 4th fill, I mean, I don't know if we're gonna keep getting barrel character out of here or not. It's not like a fixed rule, but in general, you can expect to extract flavor from the staves themselves for 4 to 5 years of constantly being filled. And all right, so now we're gonna have to vent the bung, after which point you would have a neutral barrel. If you kept it full, it still has a use because there is micro-oxidation that happens because while barrels are relatively, or should be waterproof, they are gonna allow some air to pass through the barrel. One way is how we're doing it right now. I just had to vent the bung, so a little bit of air. This barrel just took a sip of oxygen, which that oxygen is gonna wind up chemically interacting with what's in here, and it's gonna change this, right? It's gonna create micro-oxidation. It's gonna create some flavors, if we leave this in here long enough, that would be the kind of flavors you'd find in sherry or Madeira or port. So I don't really expect this to be oxidized because it hasn't been in that long, but I really don't know what it's gonna taste like. Beautiful color, just slightly less golden than the last one, I think because of the saffron that we had going on in that last mead. But still just beautiful. Also filtered on the way in. So there's stone fruit for sure. I can get that Harris Orchard in the nose. It just smells like peach flesh and apricot skin. And vanilla. There's that vanilla again. Wow. That is amazing. I do a lot of blending, and to me it tastes like 10% Harris Orchard and 90% sweet traditional mead, as if I blended it. It's amazing. Maybe even 20% now. That's really, just as I swirl and get some air in here, the flavors are becoming more expressive. So they can kind of separate in your mind as it's connecting to your nose and your mouth, and you can start to break them down, and like you're bracketing the flavor profile in a way. And sometimes when you do that, one thing becomes more noticeable, and it has a greater impact into the whole experience and how it's expressing itself. That's fun and delicious. To me, closer to Super Bee. The Arabesque barrels have a greater impact than what this barrel did on the overall flavor, but it's just adding a level of complexity that wasn't there before in the original Super Bee. And that's part of what makes great food, great wine, great mead, great beers really interesting, really good, is multiple levels of complexity. And when you don't, sometimes it's fun to use your imagination and pick out I get some graphite or some minerality. Sometimes it's nice when it's just there. And if you were trying this right now, you'd be like, oh yeah, I get that there's some peach in there, but definitely honey is the dominant flavor profile. It's so subtle and supportive. If I did enter this into a competition and didn't declare the barrel, a mead judge might, especially at the end of 8 hours of judging, may not really pick out the stone fruit so well and just think it's a super complex traditional mead. But I would want to own this. So if I did enter this particular product in competition, I would say exactly what kind of barrel it was in, because it is so delicious and I would want them to appreciate that. Awesome. All right, let's try one more Super Bee. So, different barrel again. I'll slide my work table over here. So we've already done our sanitizing. We've got our nails ready to go if we need them. So Super Bee, same thing, went in filtered. This was once a 2019 berry white barrel, and so that's raspberries and white chocolate and vanilla. And then we did cherry solstice, which was a crazy cherry mead. So I'm thinking we're gonna have some interesting dark fruit, red fruit in here perhaps, and then butterfly wings, which was a crazy concoction. So let's see. All right, that's gonna just work. How this guy's doing. Same thing, time to do some ventilation. Let a little sip of air in here. All right. That's back to that golden color that we had in the first barrel, but I think it's because it's just got a little bit of that sort of berryness boosting it up. That is gorgeous. So again, filtered, and there's red fruit on the nose. Awesome. It smells like raspberry cake. Vanilla. That is beautiful. I would say that the flavor contribution of the red fruit, I'm even getting, maybe a hint of white chocolate, which is really defined by vanilla. That's what makes white chocolate kind of taste the way it does. But wow, it's very similar to what the stone fruit from Harrah's Orchard was imparting into the Super Bee, but we're getting this raspberry flavor, but it's like raspberry dessert. That is beautiful. Really, really smooth. Barely, just the right amount of like alcohol and tannin from the wood in the finish to balance out the sweetness. This is a dessert drink after all. That is fantastic. Wow. So that's a pretty cool exploration of what the same product, fermented the same way, just the same exact product going into 3 different barrels can do, and even how 2 barrels that have the same mead in them can be just a little bit different. And now I'm gonna go and take some notes, because that's what makes the science after all. And everything that I write down is gonna include the barrel code, which we have corresponding to a spreadsheet, and I'm gonna take our notes and try and figure out what we want to do and when we want to package this, when we want to design new labels for this, and that's how we get into this barrel program. Cheers.